Welcome back. Now, Stuart, Spencer's first measure of leadership study has uncovered trends around the key relationship between CEOs and board members. According to the study, just 1/3 of CEOs said they are highly confident in their board's ability to help them navigate challenges facing organizations today. And joining us to unpack these trends in greater detail is Spencer Stuart's SA Country Manager, Guy Lundy. Thank you so much for your time, Guy. Now, firstly, just lay down the distinct roles of a CEO and the board and what they should look like in their respective corners.
So the CEO is obviously the person that runs the business on a daily basis. So they are in the trenches, they're there with their team, they're making things happen on a regular basis, whereas the board tends to meet much less regularly and usually in the traditional way meets once a quarter, which really isn't enough for them to get deep into the detail. And as a result, often the board is seen as a governance and oversight body as opposed to an organization of people that helps the CEO to run the business and to be a thought partner for the CEO.
When should they actually collaborate, and are there certain rules that need to be followed as to the level of collaboration where the one does not infringe on the other's role?
Yeah, clearly there needs to be a balance. So
Yes.
you do have some cases where you've got a board that is very involved, possibly too involved. And that's where sometimes you see boards that are changing CEOs regularly because they never really get to a point where they're satisfied with the CEO. And then on the other hand, you've got boards that are effectively run by the CEO. And often you see those CEOs becoming chairman of the board when they retire from the CEO role. And you really want to try to strike a balance between the two. The board is usually a body of people that's made up of experienced business people, people who have been in the trenches themselves before, and who are no longer on a daily basis involved in business, but certainly carry a tremendous amount of experience and wisdom with them. And it's really about accessing that information in addition to the governance and the oversight that will give the most impact to the organization and support the CEO in the most effective way.
Yeah. Well, your report has highlighted a concerning trend that actually the majority of CEOs don't have enough confidence in their boards helping them navigate organizational challenges. Why is that?
I think possibly because the boards are still operating in the way that boards were set up traditionally many, many decades ago. And the world has changed. It's moving much faster. It's much more unstable. It's much more unpredictable. Technologies are coming in and making things move and change much more quickly. So there is a need for the board to operate in a different way. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have your governance meetings that are currently quarterly much more regularly, but it does mean that you could look at creative ways, such as the use of technology, more regular meetings where the board members can get into the business, see what's happening on the ground, get a better sense of it, and do various things that will give them more information about the business and help them to be much more useful as a thought partner to the CEO.
Does that, because you talk about this dynamic environment that is constantly changing, companies and CEOs are faced with different challenges more frequently now, and I'm wondering if then that relationship should not be a rigid standard relationship where it needs to be nimble to be able to be accommodative of the kind of market conditions during a certain period of time.
Exactly. So I think that board members could certainly be made up of people that have a diversity of experience. It certainly helps to have somebody that comes from the industry in the board. Several times you'll see boards that have nobody on the board that have actually come from the industry itself. They tend to be accountants and lawyers. And that certainly limits their ability to give deep advice to the CEO who's running a business in a particular industry. But also looking at bringing on younger board members, for example, people who are much more in touch with modern technology than the people who are in their 60s, perhaps their 70s, who were running businesses at a time when the technology didn't exist.
It's quite an interesting one because it really feels like diversity here is the strategy. And I'm wondering in terms of, challenges, the board challenging the CEO and the CEO challenging the board, how much of that needs to be experienced, but also where they each understand that challenging each other doesn't necessarily mean that it is the breakdown of the relationship.
Exactly. I think if you're building up a partnership between the board and the CEO, a healthy partnership, one where each knows their role, that yes, the board does have a governance role to play and can't become too pally and friendly with the CEO, and where the CEO feels comfortable being vulnerable with the board and is able to say, look, we're having issues, we're having problems without feeling like they're going to be judged and evaluated on a constant basis. It sets up a relationship where the board and the CEO can be in it together rather than the one always feeling like they're being judged by the other.
Yeah. And just lastly, as we wrap up the conversation, are there examples, specific pillars that need to be followed that would be a good example for the ideal CEO and board relationship?
Firstly, making it a give and take relationship is certainly something that helps to make it effective.
Yeah.
Also, the diversity of the board, as we spoke about previously, is very helpful in terms of improving that. And then making time within the board to focus more on strategy and more on operations rather than just on governance, which tends to be the thing that takes up the most amount of time in board meetings. And then looking at ways to build the relationship proactively between the board and the CEO and management as well. So more of a sort of team building, team effectiveness type of effect. It really helps to build that relationship, spending time in the market together, spending time thinking about what the business could be doing differently as the world changes. All helps to develop that relationship going forward.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your insights there, Guy. Really, really interesting conversation because I think we've seen, particularly in recent years, that when things are shaky and uncertain there at the top in leadership and when the CEO and the board are not in alignment, then that does trickle down to the rest of the organization and to performance. So really, really interesting and enlightening conversation there. Appreciate the time. That was Guy Lundy, SA Country Manager at Spencer Stuart.